Well, Hurricane Felicia again blowing our socks off in the Eastern Pacific, 75 knots, that's 85 miles per hour. The latest advisory from the National Hurricane Center was upgraded to a hurricane. We expected it, and we've definitely seen it coming. Here's what the storm's going to be doing in the next 5 days or so, keeping that hurricane status up, but that basically is useless at this stage. We're going to see what the storm is doing on the discussion side of things. We're expecting a peak of 110 miles per hour now, approaching major hurricane status. Same with what the HWF is saying. We'll get to that in a second, but the improvement on the structure has been phenomenal over the past 3 hours or so, and it's expected to do that, continue that trend over the next sort of 24 hours. But it's a lovely small but circular central dense overcast over its center. There's an eye that's starting to develop around the storm. It's a well-defined eye as well, with decent convection. This means that the latest initial intensity was raised to 75 knots. This advisory making Felicia a hurricane. And a little bit of trivia, now tied for the strongest storm in the Eastern Pacific Basin for this season so far, if you're going official. Felicia appears to be starting a leftward turn with the latest estimated motion at 280 degrees at 10 knots, which is practically west, just 10 degrees north of west. And over the next 24 to 36 hours, a weak up-level trough currently centered over the Baja California is forecast to cut off and shift into the mid-level ridging, currently north of Felicia to the northwest and ahead of the cyclone. This ridge will result in a slow west-southwestward motion of Felicia. Very warm sea temperatures around the storm right now, 27 to 28 degrees Celsius, could even be pockets of 29, judging by the convection. So we could be seeing a little bit more rapid intensification at this storm, and apparently a 1 in 3 increase in a 25-knot intensity increase over the next 24 hours, which would be quite a significant increase indeed. 25 knots would put this at 90 knots in the next 24 hours, which would be quite strong indeed. Thus, the National Hurricane Center raising the intensity bar to 95 knots or 110 miles per hour in 24 hours time. So this could really be approaching major hurricane status in the next 12 to 24 hours. So a concerning sign here. And all the evidence is present on IR satellite imagery. Just look at how well the storm has been doing. Hot towers really bubbling up around the center of the storm. The eye has pretty much disappeared on the IR satellite imagery, but it's definitely still there around the center of the storm. But it's expected to pop out. If this trend does continue with that eye being apparent, we could definitely be seeing this storm up to Category 3 status, so one to watch there. Here's a visible satellite imagery, probably gives a better indication of what we're looking at for an eye. Really quite apparent it was about an hour ago. It's closed up a little bit now, but some decent convection wrapping around it, so that is to be expected. Here's a HWO forecast, not much to say here, just rapid intensification all around then. So we get towards the end of the run, the storm moving more towards the Central Pacific. We're going to see another bout of rapid intensification with the storm approaching Category 3 status again. 93 knots, pressure of 968 millibars. Keep in mind that models tend to do quite poorly on storms that are quite small, and that is what Felicia is. Just look at how tiny this storm is, barely about 200 miles across. So really not much of an influence around the center of the storm. Alright, take a look at what's happening in the Atlantic Basin right now. Here's Invest 99L, puffed up a very decent amount of convection in the past sort of few hours. That has since waned completely. It's just a bit of a pulse thunderstorm activity. Some convection that's happening around the storm. There's definitely gale force winds around it. So it's not doing too bad. If this convection is consistent, we could definitely be seeing an upgrade to tropical storm status. So that is one that we really do need to be watching out for. Use the GFS model for the Atlantic Basin of the 0Z run. There's not really much happening. We can see 99L up here dissipating over the next sort of 24 hours or so. Then we don't really have much. There'll be some tropical wave activity as you'd expect as we enter July, but the dominating feature will be, of course, the subtropical ridge, which is not going anywhere anytime soon. We do see this upper level low here, but that's probably a bit too far north and a bit too far early in the season to really become anything. Probably be worth a watch, but not at this stage. And then we start getting a bit too long range to be making any decent calls, and again, no real systems to watch. There's just increased convection around here, but that's a high pressure system. It's all quiet in the Atlantic. That's basically the message that I have. Here's the ECMW. Here's the GFS run for the Eastern Pacific. You can see Felicia over here. We'll be moving quite rapidly towards the west and intensifying significantly along the way. Then we start to see this other area of interest over here in the Eastern Pacific develop around the 72-hour mark. We'll probably start to rapidly organize, not rapidly intensify, but organize. Might start rapid intensification. It's going to be quite a broad, messy system. Probably won't get much more than mid-level tropical storm status. And we can see Felicia race into the Central Pacific and this storm die out in the northern reaches of the Eastern Pacific. And then after that, we're really going to have this swirl down here towards the end of the run. But again, that's not really forecast to become anything other than a weak tropical storm. And before you know it, we're at the end of the run. So the Eastern Pacific looks all quiet, but the Western Pacific is an entirely different story. We've got plenty of activity happening here. 98W down here could be quite a significant system towards Japan, the Ryukyu Islands, and then eventually China as well, according to the GFS run. But will rapidly organise over the next sort of 96 hours and then rapidly intensify thereafter, smashing the Ryukyu Islands with a possible landfall in the threshold of 950 millibars. But don't be fooled, the track is very uncertain depending on where the storm relocates its centre if it does do that. So we could be seeing a landfall in Kyushu right down to the southern reaches of the Ryukyu Islands and possibly even Taiwan. So the worst case scenario would of course be that landfall in Taiwan, because we have some very warm sea temperatures there, but regardless, there are warm sea temperatures ahead of this storm. I think the only inhibitor right now will actually be the storm itself, and then crushing China with a 954 millibar landfall, which would be of major hurricane status. And we see more storm activity here, significant typhoon moving through the northern Mariana Islands before hour 240, and that would probably be approaching the major hurricane status sort of threshold, 100 knots there, and then again a landfall on Japan. So Japan seems to be in the thick of things right now, and then one storm here, one storm here, one storm here, one storm here, and one storm here. So we've got 5 storms here from this big messy trough sort of thing that could potentially develop. We seem to have lows popping out of our ears, but this seems more sort of subtropical and not really storms here. Could be seeing a brief tropical storm and a tropical storm over here. This could also be a tropical storm over there. That's one to watch it before you know it. We're at the end of the run. So we'll go and have a look at what the HWF has to say on Invest 98W, because let me tell you, it's quite an interesting run that we have here. So the storm's actually not expected to attain tropical storm force winds sort of in the next or at least 24 hours or so. The HWF is actually calling for some pretty rapid organisation, but not rapid intensification until we start to get to the hour 60 threshold. Then we see those typhoon winds pop on, and then the storm undergoes probably an eye-wall replacement cycle, becomes a very large-eyed system and large-bodied system as well, 97 knot winds there at hour 93. And then we start seeing those consistent near 100 knot winds, 104 knots here at hour 102. So quite short range this is here. You take a look at a sounding in the northern eye wall, which seems to be the strongest for this storm right now, and you can see 100 knots at surface level and 140 knots at 900 millibars. So very strong system here and a good setup that we have. We'll be maintaining those 100 knot winds pretty much right up until a landfall on the Ryukyu Islands. Now I'm pretty sure that we're just north of Minami Daitojima here, so it seems like the HWF taking its time, like the ECMWF model, to get this storm into land areas. Just before I go, I'd like to take a look at the GFS side of things for 98W. I believe, again, quite a strong system on the GFS side of things, and we'll probably start to really organise after hour 48. And then as we start getting into hour 96, that sort of area, we'll be seeing the storm really rapidly intensify towards that 100 knot status, making landfall on China with winds of at least 80 knots, maybe even 85 knots, so approaching that category 2 status threshold there. Now, another thing that we probably should be noting is that storm moving towards Japan towards the end of the run on the GFS side of things. So I'll go up and take a look at Japan right now. You can see it here. If we go into sort of Sunday, that's when we're expecting the GFS to start generating this massive storm over here, moving through the Ogasawara Islands, but again, not really making it past tropical storm status, with winds of barely even touching 45 knots, I would imagine, around the centre of the storm. So not a really strong storm on there. I'm not sure. No, it seems like the ECMWF supports it, but as a weaker system and a more messier system. Let me tell you, though, the ECMWF calling for a huge system barreling into the Ryukyu Islands, but it seems to really start to justify itself a little bit better. Wind accumulation on the GFS side of things a little bit more concerning, with wind gusts possibly approaching category 3 strength. That's in excess of 100 knots as it approaches the Ryukyu Islands. Anyway, that is all that I have on the basin analysis side of things. If you did enjoy the video, make sure to leave a like, and if you want to see more stuff like this, subscribe to all the other channels that I have. Anyway, so this is the latest from me, and I'll catch you all in the next storm. Goodbye.